Hello everybody, I am Tynan Sylvester. This is RimWorld, Alpha 17. So the first thing you're going to notice here is there have been some changes to how the world is generated. And as you can see, the first thing is it actually looks like a globe instead of having a giant gray piece on it. So when you set the world coverage at less than 100%, which I do recommend because the world is unnecessarily large otherwise, you will see it as an island instead of this weird gray cut-off planet. But more importantly, some of you are going to notice that there's a little bit more going on here on this map than there used to be. Roads, rivers, paths. Yes, we now have stuff that actually goes through the map. So here, let's take a look. Here we have a temperate forest, yada yada yada, it's all very nice. And there's a huge river here. It opens into this ocean. Here at this point, there's a settlement of some kind. On that spot, there is a stone road crossing, as well as a huge river and a base. So if you arrive there, all that's going to be generated into the local map. We've actually got 4 types of rivers and 5 types of roads, and they're actually generated in a sequence. See, this here is the ancient asphalt road. And sometimes you can actually get ancient asphalt highways. So these are things that have been there for hundreds or 1,000 years or something like that. So they're all broken up. They're from some sort of pre-apocalyptic civilization. And the way those are generated is the system works chronologically. So it generates the continents first, and then figures out the rainfall and so on. And then from that chooses river points. And makes those wend their way towards large water bodies. So you're going to see there's a lot more rivers in areas with more rainfall. So this is a jungle area. The contrast is a bit low, but I hope you can see that there are quite a few rivers originating here. But in this desert area, there really aren't any. That said, rivers can flow through deserts, so depending on how the map is arranged, you can have sort of a Nile River type situation where there's a jungle, and then between it and the water is a desert, and the river flows through that desert. So I think that's pretty cool when that happens. In any case, it works chronologically. So the biomes are generated based on the rainfall, and then the rivers, and then the system will actually do some really basic sort of ancient civilization calculations and see where would the ancients have placed a few ancient highways and roads. And then it generates those. And then after that, we assume all the ancient cities and stuff are destroyed and there's just some roads left over. The system will generate the modern colonies, sometimes along the ancient roads and sometimes along water or elsewhere, and then generate the modern roads, which are these small crappy ones. So here's, a dirt path that goes out to these 2 places on this peninsula, connected to a stone road, which is also something more recent. Here's an ancient asphalt road, but off that has been extended a dirt road that runs out here to this coastal place called Devotion's Rock. So that's how that works. I'll show you the roads in the map in a moment. The rivers are pretty similar. They start somewhere, they run sort of towards the oceans, away from high altitude places and mountains. There is a large element of randomness, because that's how that works. And they will run together, so I hope we've tuned them properly, but I think they look pretty good, and they add a bit of interest to the world, and you can build next to them. So here we are in the map that has been generated, and here you are going to see a river which has been included here that runs all the way into the ocean. So you can zoom in, and Zorba, one of our developers, who is a rendering engineer master, has actually created a nice undulating water effect, which animates in a subtle way and changes over the course of the day. We did keep it quite subtle. We had it a lot more contrasty before, but just it jumped out a little bit too much, so it's pretty understated right now. But one of the fun bonuses is that people actually leave little trails. Sorry if you can't see that, it's more obvious when there's more characters, but little trails when they're splashing through the water. So I hope to pump up water visuals more in the future, but this is a really nice baseline, I think. And as you can see, the river undulates in an interesting way, and it has deeper sections and shallower sections. So this one has a lot of places where it can be forded, like there where they're doing it, or there down there. Some of the rivers are harder to get across. But it's all part of the interest of the random map generation system in the game. So another thing that has been added is the new content for world quests. So now there's a number of random events that don't involve things coming to you to attack you or mess with you, but rather are simply an opportunity of something that can be done out in the world that you can send a caravan to go do or not. So I'm just going to execute some of these incidents just to show you how they work. So here's caravan request. So we get the letter. It says, a nearby settlement, Honesty's Tree, contacts you with a special trade request. They would like to purchase 1,000 hops in exchange for 2,000 silver. And the request expires after 28 days. So we can take a look at this. See, there's Honesty's Tree. So it's a decent distance from us, but we have half a year to get there. So if we want to try to undertake this, we can. Now, a lot of things have been rebalanced in this version, and one of them is trade. The trading prices are actually somewhat more difficult because in the previous versions, people were just building up these gigantic piles of silver, and it was too easy to make money. So now it's more difficult to trade, but you get these requests where people will pay above market rates for a specific tradable resource in a specific amount. And this is one of those. So this is just a simple thing. It kind of gives you a reason to leave the base and do something that's not totally routine, because for 1,000 hops sounds like a lot, but really it's just about 15 stacks of hops. So you can do that with one decent sized field of hops and one harvest, and you can just harvest those and bring them over and pick up your 2,000 silver, which is above the market rate. So let's look at one of the other world incidents, the Bandit Camp. Bandit Camp opportunity. Kevin, Prime Counselor of Unification of Whitway, has sent us a message. Apparently bandits based in a nearby camp have been raiding their caravans. They've asked us to destroy the camp, which means eliminating all the enemies and turrets. And if we succeed, the relationships, our relation with them will improve, and they'll send us a mega screen television. So this is just basically like a combat quest. There's the camp. It's actually been spawned close to this base that we had over on this side of the world. And that's it. So the way this works under the surface is there's this concept of sites in the game now. And a site is actually, it's a location you can go to and visit and interact with. But it's not just defined one piece by one piece. Like there's one type of bandit camp and there's one type of, a precious lump of resources or an item stash. These things are composed of several pieces. So what you can have is, say, a stack of items surrounded by X, where X can be a bunch of manhunting animals, X can be nothing, X can be, a ring of turrets set up by some pirates, X can be a pirate ambush. There's a few possibilities in this version of the game, but I'm hoping to, in future versions, add more like sleeping mechanoids and different types of ambushes. So I'm hoping that this will be a foundation that will allow us to create a very wide variety of destinations for the player to go and interact with. And because the different components of the sites can all be included at once in different combinations, that creates a multiplying effect where the number of combinations becomes very large very quickly. It's still pretty small in this version. It's still pretty straightforward, but I'm hoping that will expand in the future and let us get some of that multiplicative gameplay. So, I will spawn another caravan to go actually interact with this. Tell them to attack the outpost. Speed up time a little bit. And we'll see if we should go and try to take out this base. So the base generation has been improved too. It used to be sort of a fixed algorithm that would work the same way each time. But now there is what we call a grammar system. So the way a grammar works is it takes a block of territory, say a 20 by 20 block, and then it has a number of possibilities for how it can divide that block into sub-blocks and use those sub-blocks. So maybe one of the possibilities is the northern half becomes a farm field and the southern half becomes a base. So then the system, say if the system chose that possibility, it would divide it as described, and then pass the northern half independently to another algorithm that says, okay, this is a farm field, what do you want to do with that? And then based on that, it could be like, well, there could be several possibilities within that option. So say the western side becomes corn and the eastern side becomes rice, or a shed appears in the middle, and you know, something else appears on the other side, and then those can be subdivided further and further. So it forms this sort of structure of generation where you start at the top with just, you know, a base, but it can be divided in a number of ways, and each subpiece can be divided a number of ways, and each subpiece can be divided a number of ways. And this creates what we want, which is a combinatorial explosion of all these different possibilities for how a base can end up laid out, or for how lots of different buildings can end up laid out. So you're going to see more variation in bases. Here's the enemy base that appeared in this case. It's pretty simple right now. However, the inside is fog, so you can't see what's there until you actually go in, which is new. The AI has been improved in quite a few ways. I won't get into all the details on that, but they should be much harder to cheese and much harder to exploit, so to speak, especially with, you know, tricks like putting someone with personal shield one unit closer to them than your shooters so that the enemies all fire at the guy with the personal shield. That kind of thing's not going to work anymore. They're not going to spend all their time trying to massacre your chickens while they're getting shot at, and so on and so forth. But back to the base generation system. These are all the grammar pieces in the game on this debug menu here. Faction base, there it is. So if we just draw a faction base here, like, boom. Oh, that's what it decided to do. So what if we do something similar over here? Oh, now you see it's completely different. Like, it divided differently, and then each piece was filled in differently, and so on and so forth. Now my guys are starting to fight, but we can ignore them. Or we can say, what if they don't have much space? See, this time it just built right to the edge, and there's no sandbags around this one. So it's just an integrated complex in that case with some storage space. And we'll try, oh, what if it's long and thin? Now it's developed this base that runs out quite long and just divided a bunch of times, and it's got some generators and so forth. And they can even integrate with the stone. So here's a base. Let's have it overlap with these stone pieces. And so you see it hasn't just erased what was there, it's worked to integrate the stone and even created a interior space here, properly connected with the outside, that's sort of like a buried collection of items. So, you know, you're just going to see this in the context of when you come upon a new base somewhere, and it's going to hopefully look cool and be interesting. But to us, this is a significant advantage, and it's another thing that we're going to be able to leverage quite intensively going forward into the future. So another thing to check out is other types of quests, like the item stash quest. In this case, the player learns about a stash of items that can be collected, but you don't know what's guarding it. So it could be crazy animals or it could be enemies. There's another incident that happens in the world, which is the payment demand. So in order to demonstrate this, I'll just spawn a random caravan. So here we are. We're moving the, oh, by the way, the world pathing is much better now. So you can see he goes along the road through that town and then across the river because it's faster. Or if you go there, I guess it's fastest to do that, but they'll tend to follow the roads because it's faster to move on the roads. You can have a caravan demand wherein your caravan is met by a group of pirates, and it tells you how many there are, and they threaten to attack unless you give them certain things. So in this case, we don't have a lot on our caravan, and they are demanding our people as slaves. So we're going to say no. They'll even demand the clothing off your body. So we're going to say no and fight them. But it creates a possibility for an ambush that has a little bit of flexibility to it. So going back to our colony, there's just a bunch of little new things added to the game. For example, they can now tend their own wounds. Tending your own wounds is somewhat less effective than having someone else do it. But for scenarios like the Rich Explorer, where you have only one colonist, or like, you know, if you actually end up with just one healthy colonist, sometimes this is necessary. So if you just turn on self-tending here, the characters will, when they have a wound, tend it themselves. They'll just go and grab the medicine and do it on themselves. So there's a new hat. Oh my god. Let's give people beautiful new bowler hats. Hood, put on that bowler hat, and you, and you. In addition to these fashion statements, now your guys can steal work from each other. So in this case, Hood is already going to build this bed. So in the old version, I wouldn't be able to prioritize McClure to do it because Hood was already doing it. But in this case, you can just do it and he'll just steal the reservation and that'll just force Hood to stop doing it. So that's just a little quality of life improvement. So for build management, it's now possible to have a build that will be temporarily paused when the stockpile reaches a certain amount. So for example, if this is set to take to X, do until you have X. Now you can say, okay, pause when the bill is satisfied. So say do until you have 10. That's what it's currently set to, 10 meals. Whereas before what would happen is the person would do the meals until there was 10. And then as soon as anybody anywhere just happened to pick up a meal and eat it, they would rush back across the map from wherever they were, no matter how far away they were, to cook one meal and then go off and do whatever they were doing. So it created this problem where they were really kind of stupidly inefficient and constantly going back and forth to cook one meal at a time. So now you can pause it, have it automatically pause the build when it's satisfied, and then unpause when it reaches a lower level. So here I've got that set to 5. So the character will cook up to 10 meals, and then when there's 10 in the stockpile, this build will pause. And then that cook will go about his life, ignoring the bill, and then when the number of meals in the stockpile reaches 5, it will reactivate and he will come back and cook the 5 meals, or however many are needed to get back to 10. And that will reduce that kind of foolish inefficiency which was there, and a little bit annoying before. We have worked on making fire a little bit more interesting. I've set this gigantic fire, and now it's burning the wooden floors in addition to the walls and such. And as it grows, you're going to see it's going to leave behind ash, and it's going to leave behind burned tree stumps. So the goal here is that when a fire ravages an area, you're going to see something that looks like a burned out place afterwards. This is what it looks like after a fire is swept through the area. You can see there's destroyed trees, you can see there's burned out wooden floors, and there's ash everywhere to be cleaned up. So I hope that'll just add a little bit more flavor to the fire and make wood a little bit more distinct from the other floor types, because now, though it's very cheap and kind of quite pretty for how cheap and easy it is to lay, it has the disadvantage that it's flammable. So the floors have all been rebalanced, and carpets can burn as well. There's another new incident. It's just a simple little thing. This is a backer reward called Ambrosia Sprout. Sometimes this mysterious plant will sprout, and it produces this fruit called ambrosia, which is very succulent and enjoyable to eat, but is also somewhat addictive. So there's kind of a cost-benefit thing there. Now there's a new trait in the game here. As you can see, McClure is a wimp, which means that even a little pain, 15% or above, will put her on the ground in an incapacitated state. And there's a new weapon that we are calling Chain Shotgun, which is essentially a multiple fire semi-automatic or automatic shotgun with very low range, but can potentially hit multiple targets. So the range is only that wide, but it's pretty darn effective when it hits. Unfortunately, Hood is a bad shot, but boom, it worked. So there's been quite a bit of rebalancing in this, quite a bit. Crops take longer to grow, but they yield more food. Foraging for food should be more viable. Hunting, it should be tricky now. It should really not be a super viable primary source of food. The idea here is to make each food source viable in their own way, so that they're distinct. Hunting you can do anytime, right? But it's not very effective and there's a risk of being attacked. Foraging you can do, but you empty the map out pretty quickly. Growing crops works well, but you have to wait for a while for the crops to grow, and if they get burned off, you have other problems. So that rebalance will hopefully make each food production method relevant without making any of them dominant, which should enrich the gameplay. And there's been a whole bunch of other rebalancing as well. Like I rebalanced how often different body parts get hit. I rebalanced how the shooting accuracy stats work. Whereas before, having a careful shooter trait would make the shooter completely perfect shot even at level 3 skill. Now I've set it up so that every level of skill matters from 0 through 20. And so does every modifier, whether sight or bionics or having a trait that modifies shooting. They all affect the outcome in the end. And I've modified so much more. Milking animals and shearing animals for wool and stuff is now more viable as well. The animals, I did a whole bunch of analysis on like how much food animals eat and then how much meat you get off of them. So whereas before raising animals for meat was totally unviable, now it should actually work. It should actually be a way to get food that's useful without too much effort. The skills of these characters should be more relevant now. You know, whereas before you could have a terrible miner who could set to mine out a huge area and you just have to wait a bit longer. Now, if you really want to do serious mining, you pretty much have to have a miner with at least skill of like 5 or 6, and they will learn more over time, of course. But you really want to have those skills. And similar concerns apply for constructing and growing and all the different skills like that. But there's also bonuses to having people who are really good at things. So this should hopefully make these skills more relevant than they were before, which should, again, add more dynamism and variation to the game. Like, it'll be very different starting a game with a great miner versus a great constructor, because that's going to influence the optimal strategy, at least at high difficulty levels. And this is reflected in the interface now. I've tried to just redo the visuals on this to make poor skills more obvious. Plus, when you assign someone to a work type that they're really bad at, there's a little crunching noise now that happens. And I want to make this more obvious, but you generally should be avoiding this. Speaking of this screen, you can now sort by the skills that people have. So if I give myself some more colonists, let's say I want to who are the best animal handlers? Well, now it's sorting from top to bottom. Best growers, sorting from top to bottom. And you can just remove this to go back to the default. So this should make certain things easier if you want to just sort things in different ways. And this works in other places as well. Like here you can sort by the outfits, the drug policies. You know, if you have a bunch of animals, you can sort by who their master is and so on and so forth. So we essentially redid all the underlying code that drives these table outputs here so that it can be a lot more flexible, and it'll make modding easier as well. Now beyond that, I'm pretty sure there have been hundreds of changes that I haven't even talked about. And this is one of those updates that is so rich in all this different stuff going on that I can't possibly get through it all here. Because a lot of it is refinements. A lot of it is small little detail changes just to make, you know, this little mechanic work a little bit better or that little concept a little bit clearer. And these aren't gigantic whiz-bang things, but this was a refinement update. We fixed hundreds of bugs as well. So you should see better performance and a ton of refinements, and you'll be able to peruse those in the text listing that I'm releasing with this video, with this update, that says what the actual change list is. So thank you for watching. I appreciate it, and thank you for playing the game if you are. And if not, you should definitely grab it. I'm Tynan Sylvester, and this is RimWorld, and I will see you guys next time.